Well, welcome you guys. I'm super excited about the women that God is bringing together to really learn and grow so that we can make the best use of our time. Because let's be honest, we live in a really distracting world. So even the whole idea of like making time for a book club, for some people would be like, oh my goodness, I have no space for that. But yeah, I think you guys are here, so you probably know this already. When we create space for things that matter, we get so much value out of them. We get more than that time that we invested back in. So I trust that you're going to be blessed, that you're going to be challenged, that you are going to grow because of the conversations that we have. And this is not the Lissa show, so I'm going to kind of start us off today. But I want this to really be an interactive conversation. And really, I see it too as this is just the start, right? So we have our Redeem Her Time community, where we can be having ongoing conversations, right? So this may bring up things that then we can carry over into ongoing conversations, because it's not just about the knowing, it's about the doing, right? So you may have heard me just say something. I don't know if you've been paying attention in the group, but I was using Redeem Her Time as like the tagline. And God very clearly this week was like, nope, this is the reason that you're helping women simplify their focus. That needs to go first. So I officially renamed it. And I'm in that process of trademarking the brand and everything. So it was perfect timing. So Redeem Her Time is like the front name that you're going to see on everything that's coming out from me and inside of our community and things like that. So because really that's the reason we simplify our time. You're right. We simplify our focus is because A, we only have so much time, and B, we want to make sure that we invest it in things that count. And as faith-led women, I truly believe that God has given us a bigger purpose, right? We've been called for such a time as this. I've been really leaning into the story of Esther over the past couple of days and looking at how she redeemed her time and the difference. I mean, look at the ripple effect. If you're not familiar with the story, I'm putting together a whole like thing around that. But the ripple effect that how she chose to redeem her time had on many, 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 many people. And that's what I believe God wants for us, right? As we redeem our time, as we make the best use of it, that's going to have a ripple effect into our worlds. And some of that you may get to see, and some of it you may never know, but it's just going to kind of spread out from here. So the verse that God keeps bringing me back to is Ephesians 5. And here's what it says. It says, be careful then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of your time, or some versions say redeeming your time, because these are difficult days, right? That's Ephesians 5, 15 through 17. Anybody agree? Yes, these are difficult days. I don't think anybody would be like, no, life is pretty, easy and just kind of smooth. And, so we have to be intentional, right? We have to be wise, like it said, not unwise. We have to be careful how we walk. We have to make the best use of our time. So because the fact that these are difficult days. So that's really what all of this is kind of drawing us back to, is how do we redeem our time for the time that we've been put in, for the reason that we've been put here. So that's what we're doing. And the book club is one piece of this. So I'm really excited about this book and how this can help us in doing this. So before I get into like us kind of going through and talking through what you guys read, and I just want to make this disclaimer. This is not one of those, if you didn't do the homework, you're not allowed to talk type of clubs, because I know sometimes life happens, right? And maybe you had great intentions, or maybe, the book didn't get to you in time, or maybe who knows what, maybe you just completely forgot. That's fine. I think just even the fact that you're here, you're going to absorb and you're going to get information. And then I guarantee you're going to want to go back and catch up. So I never want you to feel like if you're like, oh my gosh, I haven't read. Don't worry about it. Just be here, because you can still add value to the conversation, whether you've read this or not. And it's not a hard read, right? Would you guys say so far from chapters 1 through 3? It's not like, this is not something that you had to sit down and spend hours on, but I think the application of it is going to take a lifetime for us to do this, right? So as I was thinking about this, I just love how God just drops these things when we get quiet and start listening. I was thinking about I was like, gosh, I know there's like something about one thing in the Bible. Let me go back to it and find it. And here was the verse that God brought me to. It's from Psalm 27. And it says, one thing have I asked of the Lord, that I will seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord forever, to gaze on his beauty and to inquire in his temple. So this was written by David, who was the king of all of Israel. So a very prominent person who had a lot of demands on his time, a lot of people that had expectations of him, a lot of obligations he had to fulfill, a lot of enemies he had to not make upset. I mean, think about like all the things that were pulling at him, right? We talk about being pulled in so many directions. And yet the one thing that mattered most was spending time with the Lord, right? Like that was going to lay the foundation for everything else that he then did. And he knew that. And he said, this is the one thing that I really want to put out front. And so I want to challenge you. And I know we're all in different places in our faith walk. But God has just been calling me to really put that faith piece out in front, not just make it one of the areas that we work on, but really put that out in front. Not in a way of like, I don't know. Have you ever heard the story about like the little preschool kid who's in Sunday school class, and every time the teacher asks a question, the answer is, he raises his hand. He's like, Jesus, 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 right? Like, this is not just like, yep, Jesus answer. Okay, Lisa, the one thing is Jesus, we're done. Like, I don't want this to be a check the box thing. And I want this to be a, yes, spending time with God is like one of the most important things that we should do in our day, right? For me, it's one of the ways that I start my day. But why are we filling up? We're filling up with him so that we can pour out, right? So we're not just going to make this the, yep, I'm giving the Jesus answer and I just need to keep that my one thing. That may be a part of it, but I want this to come out into other practical ways as well. Like how will this, come out? And at another time, I'll share with you, there are a few other places where it says one thing in the Bible. So it was really interesting to kind of go through. I wrote them in the front section of my book here, but I don't want to take away from our discussion today of where we're going. So let's start off with this, because this was like, I don't know, this was like a showstopper for me. So introduction, right? I love this. If you chase two rabbits, you will not catch either one. Like that right there is so profound. So let me open it up, right? Because I want, like I said, this is not the Litsa show. I'm just getting it started. Can you relate to trying to chase 2 rabbits or 10 rabbits or 200 rabbits and not catching any of them? And what do you feel like your rabbits are right now? Okay. And I want you guys just to know, this is always a safe zone. Okay. This is never a judgment. This is never, oh my gosh, she can't figure that out. Like never, ever, ever. This is always the more authentic we can be and open that we can be, the more we're going to grow. And guess what? What you share is probably what somebody else is thinking, but wasn't brave enough to share. So you're going to encourage her, as well. But can you relate to trying to chase more than one rabbit? And what are some of your rabbits lately? So you can throw it in the chat if you're not able to talk, or you can just unmute and we'll just share out loud.
Well, my rabbits, I have more than 2.
You do? Oh, we all do.
Sadly. They're just running all over the front yard. And I feel like the timing of this is perfect, of course. The company that I use as an income source had a convention in late 2019, and the title of that convention was The One Thing.
Ooh.
And the simplicity of that, and I was so drawn to it at the time. Of course, their one thing was just love people, and the rest will come, which of course is mostly true. But lately and you can see it as a pattern in my social media, that the gospel for me, God has been just literally beating me over the head. That is the one thing. And I keep getting distracted with this networking group and this new this other company is calling us, asking us to be investors. Now there's my parents are needing some more time out of me, which is great. They're going to definitely be at the top of the list, because now I'm an empty nester and I have time to go do that. I've been given the gift of time in my life at this particular season. And I'm going to go. I go every 2 weeks, which is one of the reasons why I pulled back on one of the networking groups and joined a different one, is because it gave me the time. And one of the people's calling me right now. And so I just,
get away, right?
So I have learned the art of, thank you for asking me, but that is not something that I'm going to do right now. Not saying, sorry, I can't do that. Because I could if I wanted to.
Sure.
But the grace to say, thank you for asking me. I appreciate you thinking of me. I will let you know if my circumstances change. but that's not something that God is calling me to do right now. It doesn't mean that the thing is bad.
Right.
There's plenty of good causes that's not what God is telling you to do that day. And we don't feel like, as women, we don't feel like we have the freedom to not take care of someone. Because we feel like we have to do all the things.
Yeah. Anybody else feel that way? Like you feel guilty if you don't have, you don't say yes to every rabbit that comes your way? Lydia, yes, right? Yeah. Well, just going off of that, April, just to kind of give you a sneak peek, the Lord has been laying on my heart. I think our next book is going to be The Best Yes by Lisa TerKeurst, which is all about this exact topic.
I love her. Yeah. Boy, she's had a big, giant, messy season, hasn't she?
I know, right? Like, and how do we say yes without the guilt of saying no? How do we say no without the guilt, right? To our best yeses. And not just like you said, because we can do something doesn't necessarily mean that we should. And that was one of the quotes that I wrote down, in here. So
yes.
Yeah. But I heard you saying, you've got business as a rabbit, you've got, aging parents is a rabbit. And again, not that those rabbits are bad, but like you said, like when you are running around chasing,
right.
Of course, my husband says, well, I would just take the rifle out and shoot them. So like, that was his response when I was like, hey, how many rabbits did you today? But
shoot all the rabbits. Sometimes we just
well, actually, I will say this. He had some squirrels that made a nest in his truck that he did not know. And he was driving out of our driveway and all of a sudden heard this noise. Basically, this squirrel just committed suicide in the engine of his truck. And it then cost us several $100s, right? So then he was a vigilante to try to eradicate all squirrels from our wooded lot, which was not going to happen even when he went out there, was deciding he was going to shoot all the squirrels. So we can't shoot all the rabbits, but yeah, we've got a lot. Somebody else, what are some of the rabbits? Can you relate with trying to chase more than one rabbit? And what are some of the rabbits going on in your life right now?
Am I heard?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yep.
Sorry, it's my lunchtime. My husband and I are involved at the Methodist Church in Mount Vernon, and we're like in the music department. So it's like every music thing we're doing. And it's exciting, it's fulfilling, but it's really hard because it's like we just build up another night with a new praise team practice.
And so it's also the season where there's probably a lot more rehearsals because of Christmas coming up and things like that. So yeah.
Rehearsals, praise team rehearsals. I volunteer at the Sunshine School sometimes. So it's just like there's lots of things going on, and I'm not an empty nester yet. My kids are 14 and 17, but things are very busy.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And anybody else want to share some rabbits?
I would say for me, I started my business in October of 2019 and started working with a business coach in January of 2020. So it's coming up on 3 years with her. And that's where I first read this book. And when I first met her, I had 9 bazillion rabbits. I literally had 7 courses and like 14 different coaching programs. And that was only Dr. Ross stuff, not then I had King Center stuff. And so anyway, for me, I am super, super, super clear and thankful that I have one thing, and that is being a global educator, teaching nonviolence around the world. So if it is a yes to that, then that's what I do. And if it's a no, then it's a no. And I love this mantra. It's on the acronym TOAD, so it makes me think about it. But it is, I have the time, the opportunity, the ability, and desire to do everything. And if I was in a secular group, I would say I'm intended to do today. But since I'm with my sisters, I will say Yeshua, my shepherd, has asked me to do today. In other words, not just over a lifetime or over the arc.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I read every day is my list of intentions, but it includes should, and this is only for Elizabeth. And so Yeshua, he's loving to each one of us in our own way. Should is never from Yeshua. So all the shoulding I do all over myself, that's never from him.
Okay,
And,
repeat that little acronym because I was writing it down and I make sure I have it. That's brilliant.
So it's time, opportunity, ability, and desire.
Desire. Okay, that's the one I was missing.
So for me, if one of those things is missing, then it's not for me today. So if in my mind, I think I need to get something done today, but I don't have time, well, then that's not what Yeshua asked me to do. And so
Right.
it
Yeah.
really helps me. So, you were saying, don't we all have a difficult time? I don't have a difficult time right now. I'm not in a difficult season.
Because you've
right
created that, right? But we these are difficult days around us. You look at the world around us, right? You look at culture, you look at, just where things are at in the world around us. And it's not going necessarily in a direction that's going to give us, make things easier. It's just, we're going to have to be more intentional.
Lisa, I work for the Martin Luther King Center, and the methodology and philosophy of nonviolence, it is full of hope. We are moving in the right direction. We are. And so I just have a different perspective. And that doesn't mean that your perspective or others who are experiencing difficulties, it's just a different perspective. So.
And it's because I think you're clear on your one thing, right? You know what's going to move you in the direction you want to go. When we get into it, that is the essence of this book, is asking, what is the one thing? Spoiler alert, here's his question. What's the one thing such that it will make everything else easier or unnecessary, right? Because yes, we're trying to create this, I don't want to always have a bazillion rabbits in my life. And I don't always want to have
That's right.
all these things that are pulling at all my strings and all these things that are frustrations and distractions and all the things. So and here's what I love too, Dr. Roz, is that you're coming back to this book a second time, because this question you can ask, anytime. You could ask it once a year. You could ask it once a month. You could ask it once a week. You could ask it once a day. You could ask it once an hour. You could ask it, whenever you're feeling pulled in a bunch of directions.
What was it? You said, wait, one more time. You said something about the one thing, easy or unnecessary.
So here's the way he words the question. And again, we'll get to this. I'm kind of sneaking ahead a little bit. So, so his one thing question is, what's the one thing? And I think he says it what's the one thing I can do such that everything else would be easier or unnecessary?
Okay.
Or sometimes I like to say, or that, will make the biggest difference, because it's very easy to get, caught up in okay, here it is. Hang on. What's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else would be easier or unnecessary? So this is on page 106 is where I happen to find it. And it's written in handwriting, it looks like there. So that's kind of the question. And then you can adapt that question and we'll get into how to use it, right? Today, we're kind of more just talking about does the whole thing of the one thing really work? So we've identified, we've got lots of rabbits. Is there anything, Shana, that you want to add in about rabbits in your life?
My biggest rabbits are in my work. More, just so much on my plate. Now we are finally growing big enough that we are in the probably first quarter, end of first quarter next year, we'll actually have an assistant for myself and for my COO. So that will take a lot off. Until then, it's still,
I like the cheerleader. I need that, Dr. Roz. I love that.
Not being a list maker, and having that kind of, just not being a list maker does not help me. So trying to get back to the to-do, making sure that I'm getting things done. But even this morning, I've had, I got to do this, this, and this, and it is not on my to-do list because I'm still marking off things that there's just so much that needs to be done. In my personal life, I don't feel as many rabbits. I feel like I've really got that more narrowed down, except for one big, huge rabbit called my husband, who's the only person that I do feel guilty for not saying yes to. And so I do say yes a lot more than I should. And then I mumble and I grumble beneath my breath. For instance, go throw my clothes in the dryer. I don't ever ask you to throw my clothes in the dryer. Why would I go throw your clothes in the dryer? I am just as busy, if not busier than you, as I'm taking care of 4 teenagers and taking care of the house and building a $1 million business. And, like my life is just as busy as yours. So why am I throwing your clothes in the dryer? So, but I go and I do it anyways. And I grumble the whole time. Or like my clothes are sitting there waiting to be put away. And he's like, come help me with my laundry, put my shirts away. Okay. Are you going to help me with mine afterwards? But I don't ask that. I just grumble while I do it.
Yeah.
So that's my only person I do say yes to too much, because I feel guilty if I say no.
Sure.
Why? I don't know. He doesn't
Yeah.
help me.
Well, and that's a great conversation we can have, just around healthy boundaries and what that looks like, and being able to communicate our needs and where our limits are. And that doesn't mean we don't love somebody because we're not saying yes to every demand that they put on our life. It's actually more loving to say, you know what, this isn't something that I can do right now. And there may be times that you can. So, well, that can be a topic. Yeah. We could dive into a whole conversation about that. So now let's kind of go into, the one thing. So we read chapters 1, 2, and 3. I want to kind of open it up to you guys first. I asked you if you did, and if you didn't, don't worry about it, to come with an aha and or a question or both. Okay. So I'd like to kind of hear like what stood out to you from what you read for today. That was maybe an aha or a question that you want to put in front of us as a group.
I would say for me, my aha is on page 9. And it said where I had huge success. This is right over where it says going small. Is that paragraph right before that? Where I had huge success, I had narrowed my concentration to one thing. And where my success varied, my focus had to. And that was 1000% me. I mean, it goes back to what I said about, how many coaching programs and this, that, and the other. And actually, today, because I had 7 different coaching programs, 6 of them were directly tied to higher ed, which I was in and around for 35 years. But one of them had a very strong through line to nonviolence, which was the one that was most successful, which is the one that when I started working with Julie, that I let the other 6 go and kind of put them on the back burner because I thought maybe one day they'll ramp back up, but here we are 3 years later and they haven't. But what happened was that continued to evolve and drill down because God knew that not only was he going to ask me to be a certified trainer for the King Center, which is, we teach every so often, but also now I have the role of special projects manager. And so because my own business, he just guided me in this asynchronous. So I have a Patreon membership that is for all of my teaching videos. It's built out through May of 2023.
Wow.
So, and that was all like talk about his timing. So,
and I love how there was that through line, even when you didn't know it was coming down the road, that by you focusing on this one thing, that was going to lead to more opportunities, which is something they talked about in chapter 3, right? How when we kind of focus in on something, it often will lead to other opportunities. Yes. I love that. And what that makes me think about is where they talked about, I think it was in chapter 3, they're talking about success leaves clues. They're talking about companies, right? And like, what's their one thing? And the companies that are really well known for one thing. I mean, when you think, I remember, and this is so silly, but I just remember like, this is the example that just popped in my head. I remember like being like, oh, I'm hungry. What candy bar should I grab? And I'd be like, oh, Snickers really satisfies. And I'd go and buy a Snickers, like that was like, because they had so ingrained that in my head, that was the one thing. So if I was hungry, it was Snickers. Now, long story short, I don't go for Snickers anymore. And they probably wouldn't make me feel amazing now that I've changed some things about my lifestyle, but they're known for that, right? Like there are different brands that are known for something. And so that's how, because then all their resources are going in that direction, then that thing really grows. And so that was really a big aha for me is like you said, Dr. Oz, like if we put too much out there. So for those of us who have businesses, right? If we're putting, now Lydia, your business is a little bit different because you're jewelry. So you want to have multiple things of it. But if you're like all over the place, I do jewelry, I do candles, I do right. Exactly. And our businesses or with our coaching programs or what we offer people, through your services, Shayna, or whatever. If we're doing too much, guess what? People are confused and they will do nothing, right? Which is going to then trickle down into why is nobody listening and why is nobody saying yes? Because we're not focusing on one thing. They don't even know. They're like, I
It's
know.
because nobody hears what you're actually saying if all that is coming to them is wah, 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 wah,
Right.
wah.
Yeah.
Because Monday you're excited about this, and Tuesday you're excited about this, and then you're inviting everybody to this, and then you're like, and they're like, what horse are you on?
You're throwing all of your rabbits onto them.
Right.
So they're just like,
Yeah.
I love that.
and they don't
picture.
have a clue which rabbits.
And you go, here, catch.
Yeah. And then they're overwhelmed. So of
You
course
know,
they're
it's
gonna be
not like your catch, it's your catch.
And they
yeah,
go, oh,
right.
and then they don't call you
Us,
back.
doesn't serve them. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that. So good. So here's the question, right? Of thinking about, like, as we think about this one thing, right? This doesn't just have to relate to business. This can relate to in your relationships. This can relate to just, you know, in your health. It can relate to any area of your life. We talk inside the community about the 7 F's. So if you haven't heard the 7 F's, I love it because it helps me remember them. Like, boom. So they're faith, family, friends, your field, which is your work. So that can be if you own a business, that can be if you work for someone else, that can be you manage a household, that can be volunteering, whatever you do to serve, you know, others in your life. So that's field. Finances, fitness, which is anything mental or physical wellness, and fun. So those are the 7 key areas, right? And so, like, yeah, if we are trying to chase, you know, all these bazillion rabbits in every single one of them, none of them are being done well. And of course, we're exhausted, we're overwhelmed, and we're just going to opt to sit on the couch and binge Netflix, you know, with a bowl of ice cream rather than, you know, invest in whatever it is. So love that. Somebody else, an aha, something that stood out to you.
Well, so I had read through chapter 8 previously. So I just went back and I reread chapters 1 through 3. Because it, you know, it's another rabbit. I'm in the middle of a lot of books. I absolutely loved chapter 2 talking about the domino effect. And I like that was not one that I like. A lot of chapters when I go back and I read through, I'm just like more reading my highlighting notes. Like I 100% read it again because it really truly is. Like I don't know if I've ever actually been taught that about dominoes. So the first time I read that, I was like, that makes a lot of sense. How those little teeny tiny things can impact your life that much.
And
It's not
isn't it
about
so fascinating how the little things build up power to knock down the bigger things?
yeah.
Right.
And it you know, you're looking at like, okay, so I'm eating a salad today. I don't see a difference on the scale, but it works the opposite. I eat a candy bar today, a candy bar tomorrow, a candy bar the day after, and the candy, you know.
Those build
The
up a
same
whole lot
thing.
faster.
But sure, that candy bar sure tastes way better.
It's like working out for 3 days and you go, why am I not skinny?
Yeah.
Why? Like, I did not go walk today, but I did rake some leaves in 21-degree weather this morning.
Oh, there you go. That had some frost and snow on them, probably. It's interesting. You're so right. We can either use the domino effect in our favor to take us in the direction we want to go, or that's what I call living by design, right? I am choosing to line up these dominoes, even though it might feel really tedious. If you've ever helped your kids, or maybe you yourself are a domino person, line up all the dominoes so you can get that one epic, you know, and it all goes down in like 30 seconds, but it took you like hours to, you know, set up this whole train of them, you know. So you can either, you know, do it by design, where you're designing how you want the dominoes to fall. It's going to go up and over this and around here or whatever. So it ends up where you want, or we're living by default, right? Because the domino effect is going to work whether we are aware of it or not. I always say you are creating your results at every moment, whether you know it or not. You're either domino effect in the way you want to go, or by default, domino's effect is going to go the other way.
So one of my, so I'm actually in 4 different, sort of 4 different book clubs. One of them I'm leading with my team. And then I'm in over a small, a couples Facebook, and we're doing a book club, and we just started Atomic Habits, which is very similar. And one of the things that I actually highlighted and sent to my team here in the office, and it goes along with this, is that if you can get 1% better each day for 1 year, you'll end up 37 times better by the time you're done. Conversely, if you get 1% worse each day for 1 year, you'll decline nearly down to zero. What
Yeah.
starts as a small win or a major setback accumulates into something much more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I need to find that. That's a good quote for my, I'm in a small group. If nobody here has either heard of or used Marco Polo, let me just say how much I love them right now, because Marco Polo there is no algorithm, there's no ads, things like that. It is just a form of communication. And so there's 23 of us in a Marco Polo that are holding each other accountable to follow the Trim Healthy Mama plan. I've followed it before. I've been on and off of it again since 2017. I've lost all the weight I want to lose, but then I would be like, check the box and, but what Shayna just said about the 37% versus falling all the way down to zero, getting 1% better and 1% worse, getting 1% worse every day takes you down to nothing. But getting 1% better, is barely getting you out of the crab pot. So
Right.
you have to surround yourself with the people. And that's the other thing about this one thing theme. It's great for you to know what your one thing is. But if you don't surround yourself with people that support your one, not financially necessarily, everybody around me doesn't have to be my customer, but everybody around me needs to support me, even if it's emotionally. If they're not, then I'm battling them too. And so my one thing, and it's a resounding over and over and over. I get up every morning because I have not yet shared the gospel with that last person that I'm going to share it with before the Lord calls me home. I don't know who that is, but that is the reason why I'm still breathing. And I know that as sure as I'm sitting here. So I can use that. I can use send out cards, which is my little business. Right? I can use that as a vehicle to get to more people. I can use my sphere of influence now, which is giant, to get to more people. But if I lose my focus and I get in, that's why I was so drawn to this book club and drawn to you, because the mission at the base of it is the same. Because I'm in a lot of secular organizations, and a lot of those in 2023 are going to take second place, because I need to make sure that so many books that we read, it's even in Atomic Habits several times, you will become the 5 to 6 people that you are around the most. Dropping that rotten apple into a box of good ones does not turn the rest of them. Those good ones will never turn that bad one good.
Yeah, it's interesting. It always works that direction, but not the other direction.
Always. It's like weeds.
Yeah. Yes.
And
right.
Fat and sugar.
The things you don't want to grow bigger are the things that do it without your attention, but the things that you do require your intention to do that. And I love that.
It's because as believers, this is not our home. We are living in enemy territory.
Yeah. And what's interesting, one of the things that you said really resonated with me about how this gets you up in the morning. Your one thing should be what gets you up in the morning, right? It should be that I've got this one thing to do. And it's not I have to do this one thing, because we all have those things that are like in fact, I actually put something on my social media today about, instead of saying I have to, saying I get to, even for those things that, but and it's interesting too, that this book is not called One More Thing, right? Because sometimes I think we think, oh, that's just one more thing I want to add to my list, and really it's like, no, we're just letting all the things take the space and take the time and the energy and the focus away from what that one thing is, and our time and attention and focus going into that. So yeah.
And the irony
up in the morning.
The irony of having a book called The One Thing, when raise your hand if you have more than one book open on your nightstand.
Right.
Guilty.
Yeah. Right. Well, one of the
Because
things,
everybody says, "Oh, this is the best book. You have to read this book," and you're like, "Okay, I'm going to order from Amazon." And Amazon
I'm
comes,
in the
and you
middle
go,
of
"Okay,
it.
I'm going to read this book."
so one of the things that God's really been laying on my heart, and I feel like I'm like oozing stuff out. So I'm just going to apologize right now because God's just been putting so many ideas and thoughts and like holy downloads, I call them, in. And so I feel like I just like want to explode with all of it. But one of the things coming down the pike that I'm going to start doing with the women that are surround, in my community, is not like just looking at your whole year, but focusing in chunks of your year and really being able to put your focus. And so that way you're not trying to like, I'm trying to keep my focus on this one thing for the next 12 months, because we all know what happens to New Year's resolutions, right? They pretty much tank statistically by January 17th. But what if you had a one thing focus for 12 weeks? And you really gave, doesn't mean you don't do anything else, but you intentionally gave time and attention instead of spreading ourselves so thin, which is one of the quotes I loved out of here. When we spread ourselves too thin, we spread ourselves out so much, we spread ourselves too thin, or something like that. On page 10, you only have so much time and energy, right? Like, what if you really invested it in one thing primarily, for a focused amount of time? Like, imagine what kind of growth could happen versus this is getting a little bit of me and this is getting a little bit of me and this is getting a little bit of me, and then nothing really, like you said, it's not showing much fruit. So then we kind of end up getting bored with it or moving on to the next shiny object that we think is gonna do that. So hold tight for those things. Those resources are coming soon. But yeah, good thoughts, April. Thank you.
I did post the pictures. There was 4 different pictures that I sent to my team here. I went ahead and posted those in the group as well.
Okay, perfect. Cool.
Oh, there's
Cool.
a group.
Yes, I have a Redeem Her Time community that actually just launched in the end of October. So I will connect with you, April, about that if you want to join us and be part of that, and all the things that are word resources. This is kind of one of the extensions of that I invite people even outside the community to be a part of, because I feel like if we're growing, right, we want to spread that goodness with other people. So good. Any other ahas that anybody wants to share? I was a teacher, so I like to ask for volunteers first. I'm not going to call on victims because I don't want you to feel any pressure, but I want this to really be a way for you to kind of be able to talk some things out or ask a question of something that came up for you. Lydia, did you raise your hand?
Well, kind of. So as Lisa said, I make jewelry and I clay craft. So I've been really busy this week because I had a craft fair in the snow in Centralia Saturday. So I haven't read anything, but I am thoroughly enjoying the insights that everyone is bringing to the conversation today.
Well,
So,
but
and
even
I
look
take-
at that, Lydia, like you knew where your focus
what?
you knew where your focus needed to go for that time up until Saturday or Sunday, whenever the craft show
Yeah.
was on, right? And so
It was-
if you would have been distracted chasing a whole bunch of rabbits over the past week, guess what? You would not have had the products that you needed to bring to that show, right? To be able to, to do the things that you did there. And so you were practicing the one thing without even knowing that you were doing it, because you were identifying what's the one thing that matters
like-
right now the most.
is getting through years.
Yeah. And that's why I'm such a huge proponent of like looking ahead, previewing our month, previewing our week, planning our day, the day ahead, because that way we're able to look ahead and say, what's coming down the pike that I need to start focusing on now in order to be prepared for that. Otherwise, we're like the chicken with the head cut off. That's like, oh my goodness, and I forgot I had to do this. So now I'm running over here. And then we're just exhausted because we're trying to keep up with all the things versus having put our focus on, where it really mattered for sure, right?
Right.
One of the quotes in there was this, I thought was interesting. In chapter 1, they were talking about how we all have the same 24 hours in a day, right? And so, yeah, it's always interesting to look at how one person's 24 hours look and feel versus somebody else's. But then right after that on page 10, it talked about how we have what I call a to-do list problem. We have all these things we could do versus the things that we should do. But here's what he said is that not all those things on our list matter equally. Would you agree with that statement? And how do you determine what matters more than something else? Because sometimes, I talk with women and I even feel this myself, like, well, all these things are really important, like I can't really not do, any of them. And then I'm trying to do all of them and still in the same, hamster wheel. So kind of what are your thoughts on whether or not things matter equally and how you have discernment to determine that?
For me, I prioritize them and then do the most important things first. So like I have the big three, and I do not go to bed if I have not done my big three, which means sometimes I'm in here after dinner, which I hate to do. But there have been times that things got pushed away and I made that commitment. So, but also that happens almost never. I mean, it's so exceptionally rare that it happens. So I'm committed to it. I don't just push it off to the next day if it's one of the big three.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
I really make sure that that's, it really makes me feel good if I'm done with my big three before noon.
Right. I love that. And I'm working on how to rolling out a system where we're creating those blocks of focus, in the we have, four main parts of our day. We've got our morning routine, we have an AM block, we have a PM block, and we have our evening routine, right? So where do those three things, need to go so that it's not just on this to-do list that's kind of in my head or following me around all day long and it's getting really long. And I don't know about you guys, but to-do lists, I typically write down the first thing I think of. And then what do? We write down the next thing we think of, and then we start at the top of the list, which does not always mean it's most important. Just because you wrote it down first doesn't mean that it matters first. So I think that's a thing we fall into. Any other thoughts on how you determine what things matter more than others?
I feel like laundry piles up really bad in my house with an athlete, and he also works. So there's work clothes and my husband's clothes and like everyone's clothes. And it's like, does everyone have the essentials? Pants, socks, underwear? And if you do, the laundry can wait. And I literally
what's my baseline here, right? Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, I'm literally getting caught up on one of the last baskets of laundry that I've been working on doing for like 2 weeks because my boys have that many clothes.
Wow. Yeah. So there's a good way to create a system. I like to say things that you're having to do reoccurring, you're having to think about a lot. That's something that, create a system around it. And then it's not always something you're trying to figure out where to put that into your routines because you've already got something built in. So, but good example.
My family have all been doing their own laundry for years. So they can only do laundry
the same thing. I totally agree. Yeah.
At minimum once a week. They can't do it, unless they absolutely have to. They have to have a basket of laundry to do laundry. My boys are 16. Well, my oldest is away to college, but I also have 2 girls in our home. So I have 15, 16, 17, and 19-year-old. They've been doing their own laundry since they were at least 8 years old. And my husband does his own laundry as well. But his was because he was so picky that if I accidentally dried a shirt, I would be in trouble. So he does his own laundry.
I know. I started getting you put this back in the wrong spot. I'm like, oh, good. So the pile just goes on the bed and, put away.
We do that when dinner comes. They're like, oh, this. And I'm like, oh, well, we could eat what you made.
I love that. Right. Yeah. Well, here's one of the things I love from the domino chapter. It said on page, I think it was page 16, that the problem is the challenge is life doesn't line everything up and say, here's where you should start. And so that's why this process is so valuable. We have to have a system. We have to have some way of evaluating, because otherwise we literally, and this is how some people live, and maybe you're in this right now, or maybe you've been there, is it just like you get up and it's like from the minute you get up, you're just putting out whatever is the biggest fire, whatever's the squeakiest wheel, whatever happens to get thrown in your lap is what you're doing, versus waking up and knowing, like Dr. Roz said, here are my big 3 today. Right. When I determine that the day before, I know what those things are. I know where they're going to fit in my day, and I work the rest of my day around it. Now, that being said, life sometimes happens, and there are times when you have a plan and you've identified your one thing for the day, and God has a different plan, or your family has a different plan, or something else comes up, and this is what needs my attention now. So it's okay to lay that down. But I just thought that was kind of funny. Life doesn't line them up and say, start here. This is the first one you need to be. And so that's what we're going to be learning as we go up here. We asked you to think about ahas and questions. Any questions that kind of were raised for you, either as we've been talking today or as you were reading in chapters 1 through 3?
Well, I haven't read them yet because my book came yesterday, so
That's
I'm
fine,
just here
that's fine.
for decoration, apparently.
I had one that came to me. So let me just see where it is. Okay. So on page, well, there are a couple of different things. On page 21 for sure, I think it's kind of where it went. It says there's a little like quote up in the corner. So I'm looking at this General Patton quote, and it says, "You must be single-minded. Drive for the one thing on which you have decided." And when I read that, I thought about this term. Have you guys heard the term multi-passionate? I've heard a
Yes.
lot of entrepreneurs call themselves a multi-passionate entrepreneur, right? Which basically means I've got, 10 different businesses that I'm running and all these bazillion things that I'm doing and whatever. And I just, I like this and I like this and I like this and I like this. And so I actually wrote next to that quote, can you be multi-passionate and succeed? Now, we're not necessarily talking like success has to be a certain number or, anything like that, but just, whatever your definition of that is in that area. But that kind of made me think about like, I'm not judging anybody who calls himself a multi-passionate entrepreneur either, but can you really do a whole bunch of different things and do them at that level? Or do you need to be, like General Patton says, of being single-minded and driving for the one thing on which you have decided?
I don't believe you can, because I don't believe that multitasking is an actual true thing. It only takes you away from being able to really truly be focused and get your work done in a timely manner. That being said, that's where I'm failing. So I'm preaching to myself. I know that. But the only way you can be multi-passionate is really if you have teams underneath you actually doing the work and you're just there to oversee all of the work. But if you are the one that's actually doing the work in those areas, none of it is going to be truly successful.
Such a good point. Yeah. So maybe you can grow to that point where you can add more things in. But Dr. Roz, what you were talking about earlier about having all these coaching programs and then going down to one, I'm about to start a mastermind, and I've been listening to the gal who's going to be leading this mastermind. One of the podcasts I listened to, she's like, have one coaching option you offer. That's it. And when you get to this number with that, then you can add another one. Then you can think about one other thing. But I'm like, oh, but I want to have this for this person and this for this person. And even
Right.
It's all connected in my mind. And but yeah, so even if they could be multiple things under the same umbrella, sometimes it needs to be, my focus is going into one thing right now so that it can get the foundation. And then, like you said, maybe you bring on a team, or maybe it runs itself or whatever, depending on, what that is. So yeah, that was a question. Yeah, that just came up to me.
We've always been told with our service company that unless you have 100% tapped out those low hanging fruits, don't expand. And we did expand. We went into another service industry and it bit us hard. Like, we lost a lot of money. We sort of sold it. We've not truly been paid for it. Another local company. But it's really truly bit us. And because we had not truly tapped into the low hanging fruit in the service industry that we're in, and we had to go back to it. And the same went for my office help. Like, we truly focus almost completely on one software. We've tried other software, but we knew where our focus was. And then as far as different types of service industries that we work for, we truly had to narrow down, but it took us time and learning and errors. But then we also offered other services, and now we're down to 2 services. And so it's learning, but like with you, until you get in there and you dive in, you want to do everything and you want to help everybody. And then you're like, oh crap, now I got to try to focus
anybody
down.
by trying to help everybody. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that whole, like, less really is more. I think we think if we're doing more in whatever area, whether it's in business or whether it's in whatever it is, right? Doing more is just going to bring more. And really it ends up working up, most of the times the opposite way that it ends up taking.
But you're so excited. You think that you can do it. Like, yes, let's do this. And in all reality, it usually comes back and bites you.
And that's why we need other people, going back to what April was saying, in our life to be able to speak truth. Someone who's can say, hey, Lissa, you need to like, slow down, or, hey, I'm noticing this, or you're really good in this area. Like, have you thought about really putting your focus here? Or, and just, I think we need those other women to be able to speak into our lives. We need the Holy Spirit, first of all, to speak into our lives, right? That's why we want to spend time in the Word, because that's ultimately the one who truly knows us inside and out. And, and then inviting other women into that circle as well and saying, help me keep my focus here, because I can tend to get distracted. I can tend to get off in the weeds, right? I was thinking about even the James passage this morning, because a friend of mine is praying for wisdom about something. And I was challenging her to really, when you pray for wisdom, like believe and don't doubt, because otherwise you're like a double-minded man, like you're like the wave tossed back and forth by the wind, like it says in James. And I feel like that kept coming to my mind as I was reading this as well. It's like, if I'm trying to do all the things, I'm double-minded. I'm like all over the place, and then I'm probably not getting anywhere and expending a lot of energy and time and resources, like you talked about with your business, and not really doing anything that's really making the impact that, that I want to make. So, okay, I want to read to you guys something from page 24, just as we kind of wrap things up and let you get on to your day. This is really interesting. It says, the doors to the world have been flung wide open, and the view that's available is staggering. Through technology and innovation, opportunities abound and possibilities seem endless. As inspiring as this can be, it can be equally overwhelming. And this is the part I highlighted. The unintended consequence of abundance is that we are bombarded with more information and choices in a day than our ancestors received in a lifetime. Wow. Harried and hurried, a nagging sense that we attempt too much and accomplish too little haunts our days. And so the key that this book is talking about is living the one thing, right? That's the key, is that we do that. And so that's the question we want to answer as we're moving forward. So let me kind of tell you guys what's coming. What's coming up with book club, and then I've got a couple other quick resources I want to share with you. So the next time that we are meeting for book club is the 28th. So yes, that will be the Monday after Thanksgiving. So maybe think ahead about when you can do some reading. We're just going to be tackling chapters 4 and 5, which actually is in the section on the there's a little quick intro, I guess, in between, but the lies and that they mislead and derail us. So chapter 4 is about everything matters equally, and chapter 5 is about multitasking. Woohoo, look at that. 2 things we talked about today. So we're going to dive into just those 2 chapters on the 28th. If you're inside the community, and I think those of you guys who are not, I emailed you a list of the dates. You'll notice that in December, it would have made one of our meetings the week of Christmas. And so I backed it up. So that way so there are going to be 2 weeks that we meet in a row. So just watch that. And if you're inside the community, those are all in there. Yeah. And April, if you can't be on the whole time, that's fine. But you should have all the dates now. So go ahead and block them out in your calendar if you're wanting to, continue joining us and things like that. So that's what's coming up next. This Thursday at the same time, 12 p.m. Central, we have a power hour. So here's a great opportunity, right? To have like an adult study call. It's what I call it. Bring something that you really need to get done. And literally we get on, we really quickly share what we're working on. And then we turn off our mics and we work. And then at the end of the hour, we check in about what we accomplished and how it felt. And then we're on our day, but it keeps you focused, right? Because you're not going to be getting up to change the laundry and go, do all these different things because you're like, I'm here to focus. So if that would help you, whether it's related to your one thing, or maybe that's a time that you read or whatever you want to do, it could be clean out your inbox. It can be working on a project. It could be, I don't know, we've got company coming next week. Maybe it's something related to your house or your business, whatever that needs to look like. So that's happening on the 17th at 12. And like I said, if you're not already in the community, I'd love to have a conversation with you and kind of share what we do inside of there. And I just put together a free little guide, which I will drop in the community, and I will also drop it here. But it's how to simplify your focus in 5 minutes. And it kind of is taking this one thing and put this concept and putting it on one sheet of paper. So let me just drop, it's lissafiggins.com/5. And it's just a 1-page resource for whenever you're feeling scattered or you're feeling like, oh my goodness, I feel like I'm just being pulled in so many directions. All you need is 5 minutes and this guide, right? And it will help you kind of bring your focus back. What's my one thing right now? What matters most? What can I do? And then, within 5 minutes, you're back on track, and you will save yourself so much wasted resources and time, energy, and focus and things like that. So lissafiggins.com/5 is where that is. Any other thoughts, questions, ideas, things